Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about Escape from New York from 1981. And this film posits a world in which in 1988, facing a bitter war with China and the Soviet Union, and also racked with an ever-escalating domestic crime rate, the US government took the drastic step of converting the entirety of Manhattan Island into a maximum security prison with a 50-foot high wall around it and minefields and helicopter gunships and the works. Only prisoners go in, nothing comes out. That's what the wall and the minefields and the armed helicopters are for. About 10 years later, in 1997, a terrorist attack on Air Force One results in the US president being ejected from the plane in an emergency escape pod. Everything's fine, right? Well, no, unfortunately, as you may have guessed from the name of the movie, the pod lands in the middle of Manhattan, and the president becomes a prisoner of the ultra-violent convicts who live there. The convicts threaten to kill the president if any rescue attempts are made. They don't seem to have a lot of a plan beyond that, but that's their short-term plan. A rescue attempt will, of course, still be made, nonetheless, but obviously it's going to need to be stealthy. Can't have the convicts knowing what's going on and killing the president too soon. So, enter Snake Plissken, a former Special Forces soldier who has recently robbed the Federal Reserve and is looking at life in jail. The authorities implant microexplosives into Snake's carotid arteries and give him an offer he basically can't refuse if he wants to stay alive. Rescue the president within the next 22 hours and get a free pardon, or the bombs in his neck go off and, he expires in an extremely messy and final kind of way. So Escape from New York was written and directed by John Carpenter, and it stars Kurt Russell. This is the second of 5 occasions that the two men would work together, and they definitely click here as a pairing. Despite its dystopian setting, I will say that this film is schlocky fun rather than bleak and depressing. It proved a considerable success on release, and though, it looks very dated these days, I still think it stands up as a work as entertainment. And let's talk about why I think that. So first of all, let's address the elephant in the room. The premise of Manhattan Island being turned into a massive prison it's utterly ridiculous. Manhattan Island is some of the world's most expensive real estate. It is the site of numerous important landmarks and economic structures. And of course, it's a place where over 1 million people actually live. This is even before we think about the logistics of how power, food and water will be provided to the inmates and the difficulty of actually securing such a large area, which has, multiple subterranean integrations to other part of the greater New York region. The film addresses this absurdity by completely ignoring it, with all of the characters treating this nonsensical concept as if it was perfectly sensible. And that's a recurring tactic the film employs. It includes ridiculous things, but it doesn't lampshade them or draw attention to their silliness. It doesn't try and convince you that they make sense, it just presents them and moves on. And in doing that, it manages to keep its tongue in its cheek without gagging on it, somehow managing the very sort of delicate balancing act of being light and silly while still feeling like the character actions feel natural within the situation and have weight and consequence, regardless of how kind of oddball and unlikely the situation is. That's not an easy task, and I think 15 years later they made a sequel and it doesn't manage that task. Its sillier elements feel much more forced and arbitrary than in this film. This film gets it just about right. Secondly, a thing that's interesting about this film is apparently the script was originally written as a response to the Watergate scandal. And I feel that origin, a reaction to one of the biggest kind of political scandals in US history, definitely reverberates in the tone of the script. This is a movie that has a very jaundiced view of the authorities and their motivations and their interest, or more particularly their lack of interest, in the fate of anyone other than themselves. Their lack of interest in the lives and opportunities of ordinary people is made clear throughout, and ultimately, even the fate of the president himself, ostensibly the most important man in the government, is revealed to be of secondary importance. The real goal of sending Snake Plissken into NYC is for him to recover the briefcase that the president was carrying. The case contains information that is vitally important to the government for success of its future diplomatic plans, and no doubt for the popularity that those successes would then engender for them. And then when you recall that we are only a few years past the economically tumultuous 1970s, with the periods of high unemployment and high inflation that we saw then, and the resulting severe industrial unrest, it's not hard to see that Escape from New York's punky anti-establishment sensibilities capture the zeitgeist of its time, and with the ever-escalating gap between the rich and the poor today, and the ever-escalating rhetoric and split of the voting public, I think it's probably something that reverberates to a lot of people today as well. And finally, we've just got the cast, because my goodness, it's ridiculously strong. I mean, I've already mentioned we've got Kurt Russell in the leading role, of course, but he's surrounded by talented people who are having a good time in their roles, or certainly seem to be. We've got appearances from Lee Van Cleef, Ernest Borgnine, Donald Pleasance, Isaac Hayes, Harry Dean Stanton, and Adrienne Barbeau, who was married to Carpenter at the time. Ox Baker is also in it, but that's likely of interest only to anyone who, like me, is a bit of a pro wrestling tragic. I'm not sure if Carpenter is a fan of the form, but he did go on to make They Live, which starred Rowdy Roddy Piper and featured a fight scene that would have been pretty much at home on a WWE show. In terms of the better-known players, though, I particularly want to call out Donald Pleasance's performance. He portrays the president, and he does so with just the right blend of weaselly, insincere political glad-handing that the role requires. It's a very fun performance amid a raft of fun portrayals. So yeah, that's Escape from New York. It's a fun action romp, and if you've never seen it, I'd suggest you give it a try. And if you have seen it and you enjoyed it, how long has it been since you last watched it? Maybe it's time to revisit. Next time, the 1975 black comedy I Wonder Who's Killing Her Now, which is not at all the racy sex farce that this image kind of suggests it will be. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.